Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 2019 Steering Legislative and Governmental Committee meeting. I'd like to begin the meeting by offering a word of prayer. So if you'll bow your heads with me, I'm going to go ahead and pray. Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this day, and we're thankful for another year where we're each given an opportunity to be better and hopefully work better together as a committee and as a commission to honor those who represent us. Lord, I ask that you give each one of us tonight discernment and the ability to speak clearly and be understood, but more importantly also to be able to listen and recognize those who are wanting to help serve our community and work together to make a better Rutherford County. I ask all these things in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. Amen. I will also at this time approve the minutes from the December meeting. I'll call on Vice Chair Robert Stevens for that.
I would make a motion we approve the minutes as they were mailed.
There's proper motion. There's a second.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Rather. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and rearrange the agenda here a little bit. Steering would like to announce a vacancy on the Conservation Board to fill the vacancy left by Chuck Clark. Commissioners, you will also see that there's a litigation list on your iPad. I don't know if Josh is here, I don't see him, but we can get any questions that you might have around that. We're welcome to be able to discuss that later in the meeting, but that's also for information purposes as well. At this time, Steering needs to fill the vacancy on the Industrial Development Board and the Health Education Facilities Board to fill the unexpired term of Nate Schott. This term expires in 8 months, so this is a term that would run basically from committee confirmation and commission confirmation in January into August of 2019, and then the individual that we would move forward with tonight, if they're approved by the full commission, would have the opportunity, and so would others, to be able to apply again in August of 2019. There is a list of resumes that have been provided on your iPad. Individuals that have applied, just to kind of walk you through what we normally do, we recognize each of the individuals who've submitted an application for consideration. Then we'll give you a couple minutes to be able to speak to the commission. We ask that you go no more than 3 minutes. We do have a lot of folks that have submitted their application, which is a good problem for us to have. But we also want to be respectful at the same time, so you'll be able to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about yourself and why you feel comfortable with submitting your name for consideration. And then if the commission, or the committee rather, has any questions for you as an individual, they might ask you that time. And they also reserve the right to go back after we've gone through all of the applications to ask individual questions again if they would. So Commissioner Stevens.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, since we have so many applicants, I would like us to consider changing the way we do this a little bit tonight. And so I'm going to make a motion to put somewhat of a procedure in place.
Okay.
So I'm going to make a motion that each applicant be allowed to address the committee for up to 2 minutes.
Okay.
And then at that time, each member of the committee would select 3 of the applicants to move forward to the next round. And if there's a tie for third place, that we would vote to break that tie. And then at that time, the committee members will be able to ask the 3 finalists questions about their views on these issues. And then each member of the committee would then choose one of the 3 to move forward to the commission.
To the full commission.
And then if there's not one that gets a majority, that the third place person would drop out, and we would choose between number 1 and number 2.
Okay.
So I would make that motion.
There's a motion from Commissioner Stevens. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second from Commissioner Harris. Any discussion? Commissioner McAdoo?
I think we got a total of 9, and since we're having another meeting September the 15th, I believe, aren't we having a meeting with our legislators?
January 15th, but that one actually, Commissioner McAdoo was going to be dedicated just to that delegation.
Just dedicated
Yes, sir.
to that?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm just looking at trying to go through 9 tonight with all the information given to us and trying to make a decision tonight. This is a lot.
Actually got 11.
To try to look at tonight
Sure.
and give a decision, because some of them we didn't get until today.
Right. And again, let me be very clear though, that meeting is designated right now for conversation with the delegation, but it's at the will of the committee too, where if there is a decision to say where we want to be able to review and then move forward next Tuesday, I'm happy to do that too as well. So I'm open to whatever the committee would like to suggest. That is the discussion piece. Before we move forward on what Commissioner McAdoo said, we would need to recognize Commissioner Stevens' motion, so we still are in the discussion phase.
If not, next Tuesday, next meeting. I don't think the Industrial Development Board hadn't sent a memo to us that they're in a rush to get this memo on board. And I hate to make a hasty decision tonight, maybe based on some information that I had no way to check out
Sure.
before I vote. So, but I will hope we think about it.
Yeah, understood. Any other discussions around the motion? Commissioner Harris?
Commissioner Magda, are you still wanting to hear the applicants?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
are you saying you want to totally
We can
table it till next month?
we can hear them tonight and accept all 9 applicants, and then make a decision based on the information we get tonight at our next meeting, or the meeting the 15th. That's what I'm looking at. So they can give us all the information tonight. You know, we can ask them questions or whatnot. And we can even go by his outline if you want to, and narrow it down to maybe 3, 6, or whatever, however we want to do it. But I just think it's a lot of information to try to do tonight for 9 applicants.
I think it's 11, actually, Commissioner.
11, it was 9, they
Yeah.
grew 2 more. It's 11.
Start talking.
Yeah.
No, very, very good point.
I believe that those applications were on the SharePoint site Thursday or Friday, the last 2.
I think they were. I saw
It's been
them,
out there.
I saw them
And
yesterday,
The first
or over
9
the
were,
weekend.
the first 9 have been
Yeah.
there for like a week or more.
Yeah, I saw
I'm
'em.
looking at one received January the 4th, 2019. That was Friday.
Yeah,
So I had to, over the weekend, to grab whatever information off this resume I could, with everything closed and whatever, or
Sure.
whoever, and references and everything else. I had to try to get a hold of them over the weekend for tonight. And I just don't feel comfortable with that myself.
certainly. Any other discussion around the motion from Commissioner Stevens while we're in the discussion period? I'm going to have Becky read back the motion, if you would, please.
Okay. The motion is, each applicant will address the committee for up to 2 minutes. Each member of the committee will then select 3 applicants to move to the next round with the highest vote totals moving forward. And in the event of a tie for 3rd place, the committee would vote to break the tie if necessary. Committee members would then be able to ask questions to the selected 3 applicants. Then each member of the committee would choose one of the 3 to be recommended to the full commission. If one applicant does not receive a majority of the votes, the 3rd place applicant would be dropped out of the round, and the committee members would select one of the remaining 2.
Very good. Let's call the roll on that if we can, since there's been some conversation around that. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Cush?
Yes.
Commissioner McAdoo?
No,
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Commissioner Rather?
Yes.
Commissioner Turner?
Yes. The motion passes with 6 to 1. So we will begin this first phase here with recognizing all of the individuals that have submitted an application. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone. We can't pick everybody. Believe me, we would love to, because this type of energy is what we need in the county, and we're very grateful that you think enough of Rutherford County to be able to submit your name, but as you know, we can only select one. But very much, everyone here is qualified just by wanting to serve, and so we appreciate that. Is Paul Long in the audience? Mr. Long, would you like to stand up first and give us 2 minutes on your background? And that, I'm going to try to go, commissioners, in order of the applications as they appear on the iPad, so you can follow along there. This is Paul Long.
So I got in the earliest under the wire, I suppose.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members
Yes,
of
sir.
the committee, for allowing me to come tonight. My background was in the application, but just to summarize, I've spent my entire career really involved with local government in one form or another. I spent the first half of my professional career working for the State Comptroller's Office, and the last 8 years of that period of time, I lived in Murfreesboro and did the I-24 shuffle to maintain my employment. So I think that makes me qualified to appreciate how important it is that we get the proper kind of development in Rutherford County and create the jobs that our children need to be able to stay and live in this county. I may be one of the few people in this county. I have 3 children, and all 3 of them are still here and still in the county and still employed, and doing well, I hope. I've got 4 grandchildren and a 5th one on the way, and I hope that they can all, in their lifetime, be able to stay in Rutherford County through adulthood. I think it's a great place to live and a great place to work. Currently, I'm Controller of Consolidated Utility District, and in that capacity, we see development and what impact it has on us, and I would love to bring that aspect to the table for to be able to look at development and know what kind of impact it's going to have on the infrastructure in the county, not just roads, schools, those kind of things, but also the other natural resources and that sort of thing. Those of you who may not know, we've been fighting with the Corps of Engineers for 10 or 12 years trying to get additional withdrawal capacity from J. Percy Priest, and hopefully we're going to get that, and that should remove some of those concerns. I do plan to retire full-time employment in June, so if you have any concerns about that, that should resolve itself. I was also, while I was finance director for Rutherford County, I was involved when Destination Rutherford was first launched. Thought that was a great initiative, and I think it's done some great things for the county, and I'd like to see that continue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Long, does the committee have any questions for Mr. Long before we move on to the next application? Thank you, Mr. Long. Andy Dickey.
So,
Welcome.
I'm Andy Dickey. I won't go through absolutely everything that's in the cover letter or the resume, but I was born and raised in Tennessee, in Nashville. We bought our house in Laverne in '99 and moved around a bit. And glad to be back in Murfreesboro. I have a long-suffering wife and 2 wonderful boys that attend the Blackman Cluster. I've spent my whole career with 1 foot in the technology business and 1 foot in the construction business. So bringing technology to bear on construction. I think when I think about my boys who are 13 and 10 and wanting them to be able to stay close to home, I think we've done some really great things in Rutherford County over the years, but we need to be focused on making sure they can stay home, like Mr. Long said. We've done a lot of work as of late, working on helping young people be able to apply technology in the workplace. But I think with all the automation coming down the pike and everything, we need to be in a position to help create jobs where they can invent those technologies. So having a lot more high-end jobs. So my customers are everywhere in the world that you can think of, and I hop a plane and I go see them, so I get to see a lot of interesting things and how things are done around the world, and hopefully I can bring some of that back to the county that I love. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Dickey from the committee? No questions. Warren Russell. Mr. Russell, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Warren Russell. I live here in Rutherford County, of course. I bring you experience not from the government world, but more from the industrial world. I have over 20 years experience, and I've reached the level of Senior Vice President of Operations globally for Simplicity Creative Group. And we ran factories in the U.S., in China, in India, in Mexico, and here in the United States. My experience has been as an engineer and as a manager of all of operations. And I love Rutherford County. I had the opportunity to live in a lot of different places, but I choose to live in Rutherford County, Tennessee. I am from Tennessee, and I wanted to come back to Tennessee, and we really came back. As of late, we've gotten out of the industrial space, but I want to use that experience. We plucked our roots here, and the way we've done it is we bought real estate here. We bought a lot of it. And I enjoyed the real estate game here, but I also enjoyed manufacturing. And I think what we really need for our kids is those jobs here. And I think I have the skill set. to go out and help the county bring those jobs here, because I know what it takes to attract a manufacturer, because I've been that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Russell. Any questions for Mr. Russell, committee?
I do, sir. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Harris.
Mr. Russell, what kind of jobs are you wanting to attract here?
The bulk of the jobs are more high-tech or more headquarters type jobs. If you look at Rutherford County, the one thing we've attracted because of the nature of where we're at is a lot of logistics jobs. And if you look at Tennessee and where we're at in the United States, this is the best place for it. What we need to do is make sure we have the right infrastructure and the right surroundings to attract the headquarters jobs that come along with those logistics type jobs.
Thank
So
you.
those are the jobs I want to attract, because my kids are graduating from college and I want them to stay around here.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Russell? Joey P. Mr. P., please introduce yourself and your
Thank you,
qualifications.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate the steering committee and appreciate your consideration. My name is Joey P. I'm a lifelong resident of Rutherford County. I'm currently the CEO of Murfreesboro Medical Clinic. I've been in that role since 2003. Prior to that, I was the CFO for almost 5 years. Before that, I spent 10 years on I-24 Speedway like Mr. Long, driving back and forth to one of the largest accounting firms in the world. I am a CPA by training and spent quite a bit of time in the audit profession, honing an analytical skill that I think still propels me today. I used the gig at MMC to finance a bee farming habit out in the eastern part of the county. And so as a resident that grew up here that has seen the tremendous growth over the last 50 years, it's imperative that we have folks that are committed to making sure Rutherford County grows, as a lot of the candidates have said, with good quality paying jobs, regardless of those types of industries, to find things that are really going to instill the ability of our county to grow reasonably and sensibly. I see the role on the IDB as being an opportunity to use my skills that I've developed in recruiting physicians. If you think about, we got as low as 37 physicians in about 2001 at Murfreesboro Medical Clinic, and we're now approaching 90. The growth that we've undergone, I understand what companies are looking for when they're looking to relocate to this area, having done that myself with our 2 building projects and now a 3rd one that we have underway down on South Church Street. So I do appreciate your consideration. I'll be glad to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. P. Any questions for Mr. P. from the committee? Thank you. Mark Hurdle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity. I applied today because I'm in the midst of retiring as a real estate developer and automobile dealer. I attended MTSU in the early 70s and came back in 1985, January 16th, as the Olds Cadillac dealer. I've owned many dealerships in Cookeville, Jackson, Dixon, Chevrolet, but my heart's always been in Murfreesboro. My wife's a retired school teacher. We live on Thompson Lane. I would describe my career in 3 roles. I'm a business person. I've started many companies, and I know what it takes to attract business in communities, having been in business in many communities. Also, I'm a public servant. I was on the original board of directors of Boys and Girls Club for the first 10 years, did 8 years on the trustees at MTSU, the last year as chairman, 8 years on the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce, the 9th year as the chairman of the chamber, 2006 Business Person of the Year, 2016 Business Legend. Also, to give you an idea of my role outside of just the development, I was the first person to buy both sides of the property of the hospital and develop that into buildings for both business and medical, and I'm finishing that project. I founded a drug packaging company on April 14th of 2014, sold it last year to Cardinal Health, and they've just announced in Laverne a $22 million expansion. So I've been in a lot of different kinds of businesses. And now that I'm retired, I think I know what it takes to attract business and why we should attract them. And the last thing that I would like to say is that I really take seriously my role of a philanthropist in this community. I have given significant gifts in all areas to many, many different projects. The latest, the Mark Pirtle Blue Way at Highway 99 at the banks at West Fork, and chairman of and major contributor to the New Alive Hospice. So I not only want to live here, but I want to make it better. And I didn't feel it was appropriate that I be on the IDB board as long as I was in development. And now that I'm ready to retire and be an investor, I do think it's appropriate. And I thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee for Mr. Pirtle? Thank you. Mr. Tony Gaines, are you next? Mr. Gaines, welcome.
Welcome, Mr. Chairman and the committee. My name is Tony Gaines. I come here 25 years ago to MTSU from Georgia, and I applied for the board. I've been in law enforcement for 10 to 15 years and looking at people that go through the trial and tribulation of not having the type of jobs that they are willing to work at. And when I got the opportunity to apply for the board, I thought it would be something that I can bring, maybe to help bring jobs here that were good paying jobs that the citizens of this county that I live in, that they can have a modest lifestyle as well as living, as well as financially stable in this community. So that's why I applied for the job.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Gaines from the committee? Mr. Burris, Justin Burris.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mayor Ketchum and committee. Well, certainly some qualified candidates here. My name is Justin Burris. I'm a lifelong Rutherford County resident, and I want to use my experience in business development and finance to promote and assist the planned development of our industrial community. My qualifications include a master's level business degree, a 10-year career in commercial finance and business development, and in addition, I've got a decade of experience recruiting businesses and developing needs-based solutions and incentives for corporation and industry. My desire to serve on the IDB stems from growing up in Murfreesboro and seeing how the growth can benefit my family, my friends, and my community. In that, I feel that as the business community succeeds, so does the community if done in the correct manner. As you know, Rutherford County's location on I-24, as well as other major thoroughfares, it's ideally suited for manufacturing and distribution, in addition to corporate headquarters and office operations, both large and small. If appointed to the board, I'll work cheerfully and efficiently with the members of the board and industry leaders, and I appreciate your consideration for this important position. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Burris? Commissioner Cush, yes, sir.
Mr. Burris, could you expand just really briefly on the comment you made about your 10 years experience in business recruitment?
Sure. So part of my role, I'm a commercial vice president of commercial banking for Franklin Synergy Bank. I've been in banking for about 12 years total, and the primary role is establishing relationships and recruitment of business. In this particular case, it's going to be to recruit them as clients of my company. But the way I kind of look at it, it's a similar function in that you've got to provide an incentive, you've got to recruit them. And so in that manner, I'm comfortable working with leaders of business and folks that would make those decisions to come on board.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions from the committee? Thank you, Mr. Burris.
Thank you.
Ms. Joyce, Andy Joyce. Hi.
Thank you, Commissioners, for letting me come today. I appreciate the opportunity to serve. I've served in several roles over the years. I've been in Rutherford County since I came in 1974 to go to college at MTSU, graduated, stayed, have been in the business with the Chamber of Commerce for 5 years, working with industrial recruiting. I worked with the Leadership Rutherford program as the founding director for 7 years, so I worked with a lot of the leaders in our community as they were coming up. And then I've been for the last 25 years working with the Realtor Association, which has now grown to serve 8 different counties. So a regional perspective of a lot of the things that are going on and what we need to be involved in and what we don't need to step on top of. We have a lot of activities going on in our county, and jobs is important. It's an important part of our infrastructure. It's an important part of our culture here in Rutherford County, having growth opportunities handed to us just because of our location. having worked with Nissan and several of their vendors when they first came while I was at the Chamber of Commerce, gave me a lot of perspective about working with international businesses as well as local. I've also worked with a lot of the regional groups, including the Transit Authority Citizens Leadership Council that Mayor Bragg in his time appointed me to serve on that. I also serve as a bank board trustee. I've also been involved in a lot of different community activities. So the perspective, while may not be singularly focused on jobs specifically, real estate and the development of my county has always been important to me, and I've always been involved in those different activities. Spoken before the commission before, spoken before city council before. So I'm very comfortable talking to the community and the businesses when we need to put them together. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Joyce from the committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Mrs. Joyce, on your Rutherford County Chamber experience, it says collectively 5 years, and can you tell me approximately the time frame and the years you were involved in the chamber? You say interim director, and then of course you talked about leadership Rutherford and things like that, but kind of give me a time frame of when you were involved in the chamber heavily.
Wow, dates are tough.
I mean,
when Marcy Richmond was the chamber director, and that would have been probably 85.
Okay.
And I was there for 5 years and began the leadership program during the last year that I was there when Ralph Vaughn came on as the executive director. I was served as the interim director while they were doing the search program. And then when the leadership program began to grow, it became an independent program, and I was the director for the first 7 years of the program.
Thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Hey, I have a tough time with birthday, so
I understand.
history's even tougher.
All right, thank you.
Sure,
Any other questions for Ms. Joyce? Thank you.
thank you.
Marty Leonard.
Thank you for letting me come speak to you tonight in the consideration of this. I've been in the calling on manufacturers and industries all over the country for the last 35 years. Just to give you an example, I was on the acquisition and expansion team for Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company and Huntsman Packaging. Traveled all around the country looking at sites, acquisitions, whether it be new build-outs or whatever it happened to be. In '98, I had a chance to get back here. I actually came down, met with the industrial development boards from many communities, started a plant, Shelbyville. My business partner and myself kept it for 10 years. It hit 20 million in sales, and we sold it in 2007. Matter of fact, my partner and myself, we still own the building and the land down in Shelbyville. But I've been involved in manufacturing. I call on manufacturers every day all over the country, or all over North America, actually. I'm the sales director from the company I'm with now. So I'm meeting with the heads of companies, and everybody kind of knows that, if you start building your business, you start getting jobs and everything, that manufacturing is a great place to do that. And that's what I've always been involved in, from one section, from starting in sales up till now. But I've been the owner of a company. I've come down here. I've worked with the Tennessee Small Business Association. I've worked with, TVA for a loan to start our plant down there. We invested $10 million down in that factory, and it's still running today. So I have a lot of experience. I've got a son going to MTSU. Just to give you an idea, I started elementary school here at Bellwood, so I've been around a long time. But thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Leonard from the committee? Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Arlen Harris. Mr. Harris?
Yeah. Thank you for this opportunity to come before you. I'm Arlen Harris. I've been a commercial banker for 40 years. And the pleasure, 25 years of that's been here in Rutherford County. And so what a great place to be. We all love it here. And it's really worked out good in being a banker in this area. From my experience, I've encountered lots of different businesses. I'm involved with developers and things like that, so I think I have a lot of expertise, and there's a lot of things you have to look at trying to pick partners or people you want to come in. And so I think I've had a lot of years of experience in doing that. I've been involved in the chamber in prior years. Spent probably 8 or 10 years or so ago. I was treasurer of the Chamber of Commerce and served a couple of years. Mike Cush when Blake and Blake Smith was there, Steve Harrison. So this is my home. I think I could bring a lot to the table as far as maturity and knowing, what we do in our business. We have to know the good guys from the bad guys, and I think that's a lot of what we have to do. Who we want businesses to come in and make sure we're getting the right type of jobs and the right type of people. I talked to several commissioners, and one thing that's come up that, I work with Pinnacle Bank, and Bill Jones is with Pinnacle Bank, and so I've been asking, does that cause any problems? Well, I'm up here not because of my job with Pinnacle Bank, although that job I think is giving me a lot of experience that would help me do a better job, but I'm here because personally I like to give back to the community. And so if something came up that was like that Pinnacle was somehow involved in, I would be recused anyway from making some kind of decision on that. So I have high ethics, and so does Bill Jones, so I don't see that as an issue. I hope you wouldn't see that either. So anyway, any questions from anyone?
Any questions from the committee for Mr. Harris? Thank you. Larry Sims. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Committee, Industrial Development Board, for letting me have the opportunity to talk to you tonight. Excuse me. I've been a real estate broker, investor, developer from Rutherford County for several decades. I have a long commercial interest in the growth and prosperity of the governance and the county, of our county. Personally, I have a strong desire to give back to the community, and that gave me and my family so much. Over the course of my career, I have been involved in many land developments, projected several specifically industrial use. I am a licensed professional. I've been in business for 40 years, and I have gained a level of experience in overcoming obstacles. Achieving success is widely a barrier and a situation I feel very served me well as a community member. My professional life, I've always tried to hold myself to associates to a standard of excellence. I look forward to serving on the committee, striving to the same experience and benefits of Rutherford County. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sims, any questions for Mr. Sims on the committee? Commissioner Reed.
Mr. Sims, I know for a fact of your military background. Do you see from some of that right there any type of development that could come from that direction, or anything for this county? Or?
Well, I think that's one of the things, once you get on the committee and you start looking at, I would say absolutely there is, because of the location where we're at, with them moving the guard on Weekly Lane. I think that's one area I definitely explore and look at. We've got several things of that same kind of nature that has a tremendous possibility, and that could be one. Another thing about the airports, what are we going to do about that, and these kind of things. So the good thing about it, it's a learning curve. I'm sure that we're going to have to get a lot of information and make some basic decisions, and you won't do that until you get on the board and see what direction, not myself, but what everybody on the board wants to, and what the county wants to do.
Sure. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Sims? I believe that was all of the applications, which that was a lot. Got a lot of good candidates. Is there a motion on moving forward? With Commissioner Stevens, I was saying Commissioner Stevens' motion. Was there anything else before that? Commissioner Stevens mentioned that we were going to each nominate, I believe, 3 of the individuals that we wanted, and then use those top 3 to select a nominee. Okay. Becky, if you'll call the roll, and then Becky calls the roll here, if you'll provide your 3 finalists. She can record that.
Commissioner Harris,
Long, Mr. Russell, Ms. Joyce.
Commissioner Cush,
P, Russell, and Harris.
Commissioner McAdoo,
Russell, P, and Earl.
Commissioner Reed,
All of them, but Long, Russell, Sims.
Commissioner Stevens,
Sims, Joyce, and Russell.
Commissioner Rather,
Joyce, Long, and Russell.
Joyce, who was your second one?
Long.
I forgot. Long.
Okay. And Commissioner Turner.
Russell, P, and Sims. Please tally the top three.
Interesting. Russell has 7. Long, P, Joyce, and Sims had 3, and Pearl has 1.
Four-way tie for second. Yeah.
Russell is,
Okay, so this was it's actually, Mr. Russell had 7 votes moving forward. Then we had a plethora of folks that had 3. Long, P, Joyce, and Sims all had 3, and then Pirtle had 1. So Mr. Russell and then those individuals actually move forward, or do we need
We're
to?
gonna break the tie.
We could break the tie
So you
if
have
we
to
can
vote
do that. So
For 2 of the 4.
let Becky read back those names. So Mr. Russell moves forward to the final round with 7. The 4 that have 3 votes are Long, P, Joyce, and Sims.
okay.
Now, do we need to have, I guess, the top 2 from that move forward? So you'll vote for 2 from there to move forward on this. So give Becky a second to let her. And I apologize to everyone watching at home and in the room. This is, we threw a curveball to Becky, so she's operating under a stopwatch here, and that's our fault.
Oh, that's okay.
So Becky, if you will read those commissioners' names off, and again, commissioners, it's for Long, P, Joyce, and Sims, and pick 2 of those.
Commissioner Harris,
Joyce and Long.
Commissioner Cush,
Joyce and P.
Commissioner McAdoo,
P and Sims.
Commissioner Reed,
Long and Sims.
Commissioner Stevens,
Joyce, and Sims.
Commissioner Rather,
Joyce and Long.
Commissioner Turner.
P and Sims.
Joyce and Sims with 4.
Okay.
Long and P with 3.
Okay. So Ms. Joyce and Mr. Sims move forward to the final list with Mr. Russell. So commissioners, you want to jot that down. It'll be Mr. Russell, Ms. Joyce, and Mr. Sims are the final 3 candidates to fill the vacancy on the Industrial Development Board. And before we vote on that final one, is there any questions that the committee would like to ask to any of those 3 finalists before we move forward?
Are we gonna be able to ask them questions?
Yes, sir, you can
Again?
do that now if you'd like. That's what we're going to do right now. Ask them questions if you'd like. If not, we're going to move forward with the final vote to fill that vacancy and move it forward to the commission.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Why not let these 3, I know after they've sat down and let their mind rest, they may think of something else they wanted to tell us
Sure.
that they left out. I'd give them that opportunity.
I am open to the committee, whatever the committee would like to do. I'm one of 7.
I would
I'm
like to
happy
ask
do
a
that.
question, but I like, instead of me getting up every time, have them answer the same question.
Sure. We can do that. We'll give the candidates a chance to speak. Mr. Russell, if you wouldn't mind going first again, just reintroduce yourself and maybe cover anything you didn't, and then the committee might have some questions.
My name is Warren Russell. And one thing I didn't mention is I am a planning commissioner for the city of Murfreesboro. In doing that, we do look at a lot of the development activities within the city and understanding what those development needs are from developers. It helps us also understand what the industrial needs are. My background, again, is in manufacturing. And in manufacturing, I've moved operations from the U.S. to China during the wave of when we were moving a lot of stuff to China. I've moved operations from the U.S. to Mexico during the wave of when we were moving a lot of operations to Mexico. But I've also moved operations back here. And I've wrote papers and went to conferences that spoke on reshoring those jobs back here because of the advantages that we have now. With the increase in rates of pay in those developing countries, we can now bring those operations back here, and with automation, we can bring them back here and be more competitive than they are there. So that perspective is what I bring to the table.
Commissioner Harris, did you want to ask a specific question?
Are you familiar with the Wolverine Project?
No.
Okay. What it is the board was voted on a company and bring 800 jobs here. And then it got reversed. My point is this, do you see simply just having jobs here? Or do you see high paying jobs and try to use your powers to get people in here that can afford the housing for the apartments instead of just a minimum wage job?
So I will tell you from my perspective, I really don't care to bring a host of low-paying manufacturing jobs here. I really want to focus on higher-paying jobs that need to utilize the technologies that we have in the U.S. I also want to focus on, I think there is a dire need in Rutherford County to bring more headquarters-type jobs here. We have done a good job of bringing logistics jobs. We've done a good job of bringing manufacturing jobs. We have not done a good job of bringing a lot of headquarters-type jobs here, which are high-paying.
Any other questions for Mr. Russell from the committee?
Well,
Commissioner
are we
Stevens?
asking them all at one time, or how are we?
I was going to just go to the next candidate, unless you had a specific question for all that they need to address.
I was going to ask the same question. What's the minimum salary or the minimum dollar amount per hour that you would be willing to accept before somebody gets a tax abatement?
Well, so it depends on what industry we're talking. So if we're talking manufacturing, it's one number. If we're talking a headquarters type job, I think it's a different number. If we're talking manufacturing, anywhere between 35 and 40,000. If we're talking a headquarters type job, I think we need to be looking at the $60,000 range.
Ms. Joyce?
A lot of the jobs that we do already have also have housing issues. So in looking at the Industrial Development Board and bringing jobs in, I think we have to look at what we can house, as well as what we can bring to the table in terms of quality people to fill those jobs. We've got a terrific amount of folks coming out of MTSU that are looking for quality jobs, and they don't all need to be manufacturing. We've got some skills and some technology that's just sitting still or filtering away from us, looking for other opportunities. So we need to be able to bring in some good quality starting jobs that will afford people to grow their businesses, retail as well as industrial. But we've also got to make sure that we bring in those higher paying jobs so that we can continue to grow our economy in a balanced method. I look at a lot of the jobs that we have now, and his price point is probably pretty much right on. If we're not looking at an industrial job at around $40,000, it's not affordable to live here much anymore. And if we're not looking at some type of long-term executive position that's going to be anywhere to $70,000, $75,000, you're going to lose those people to Nashville very quickly because they can afford to do that someplace else. So we need to be bringing those jobs here so that we can make sure that we've got those people in our economy and making sure everything grows together. So in answer to your question, no, I was not familiar with that proposal or project either. But I think looking in a regional perspective, I know what our competition is because I work with 8 different counties in the Middle Tennessee area. The jobs, the growth that they're looking at, the infrastructure that they are not providing, and we're really, really close to having all the tools in the toolbox ready for anything that comes our way. But I know that that cost of living, if we can't afford to keep those people here, they're going to go on and move down the road, and the jobs will go with them because there's some other industrial spots that are looking really, really aggressively for new jobs to come out there. So I would be very happy to see what else we can bring to the table here.
Commissioner, seems that answer your question as well?
It does.
Okay. Commissioner Harris, that answer your question. Any other questions?
No.
Commissioner Reed, yes, sir.
Let me ask you, I know whenever we're talking about schools and what we're running into right now is where we place these schools. And we've already had one situation where we wanted to place a school and we couldn't put it there. I don't know if you've given any consideration that we're talking about bringing industry into this county and we're needing more where we want to put this. Any ideas of where we're going to put this industry?
I think there's a lot of underdeveloped areas that have different needs to be able to use them. We've got to have some additional sewer or septic systems that will allow for those kinds of fields to be set. We've got some smaller tracts that we could be addressing with some smaller manufacturing groups that still pay well, but they don't need a massive amount of space. So there's some dead spaces that can easily be accommodated for some businesses that may only bring in 25 to 100 employees, but they don't need as much space. And so we can get those things placed pretty quickly, and that still raises our economy and raises the income levels that we can afford here.
Commissioner Harris.
Can Mr. Russell answer that question as well?
He can.
Can you repeat the question?
My question, would you?
I'd like to hear his take on it as well as
Well,
Mr.
what
Sanders.
I was saying is that we run in situations right now with where we're placing school campuses right now with the size that they have there. We're talking about bringing in industry right here. Have you given any thought of where we place this new industry? Or?
Well, I think from her perspective, she's absolutely correct. We do have infrastructure problems if we want to attract a large industrial operation. But I will tell you too, if you attract a large industrial operation, they can have funding that will help us develop that also. So as far as where we could put it, I mean, there is a lot of land that is available. Although we are developed in the core, there's a lot of land outside the core that is available that we could tap into, whether that's down the 24 corridor going towards Nashville or down the 24 corridor where we started developing the sites where Amazon is. There's a lot of land that we could develop.
Any other questions? Mr. Sims?
Thank you. Thank you again. One of the things about it, you know, when you build a house, you got to get the foundation. Without it, you're lost. Now, all that other stuff means nothing. But what's happening to us here, we do not have areas to develop. We need zoning for industrial property. We need to be out looking. We're going to be limited. We do not have a lot of property. It might appear to be because you got the city to put up with, the county to put up with, the zone, the sewer, the water. So when you factor all of those in, what you start looking for, the window of opportunity in getting those properties is getting fairly narrow, okay? And I was a member, not only chamber here, but Nashville for several years. And they always spoke to us, and they said when these industrial users come into this area, they all come down to 840 and they stop. They don't come on down further down I-24 or these other areas. They just want to be right there at 840 because I'm sure it's the traffic. So if it's been that way a few years ago, it's probably still that way. So obviously, we need to be looking at 840 to find out where we need to be developing. And then you're going to be somewhat limited. You're not going to put it out in Blackman, are you? Of course not. They're not going to let you do an industrial park out there. So you're going to be kind of limited, and I'll tell you where you're going to probably put it. You're going to put it around Broad Street on the Orch property, if possible. After Congress, you might get it. Or you're going to be Summer Springs Road. And probably the best area to put an industrial park is on Jefferson Pike. You're over there where everything's happening. You got Wilson County, the big racetrack. They're building all the industrial warehousing over there. The reason industrial warehousing is doing so well over there, the land was cheap. They brought the sewer out for the racetrack, and nobody wanted to come to the racetrack. But the racetrack has made a boom out of industrial development because it brought the sewer. Well, we got the sewer problem over here. You've got Jefferson Pike is supposed to be served by Smyrna. Okay, well, then that gives a problem if you want to get served by Murfreesboro, which could be possible because it's not that far away down the creek. So some of those things are going to have to come into play to getting the sewer there. It's only money, so you don't get the sewer. That shouldn't be a problem. You got the property out there, and most of it's rock anyway. You got several rock quarries. Those are perfect scenarios to put industrial uses. So we know we've already targeted where it needs. I think we knew where we need to put it, and we need to concentrate on getting 1,000 to 2,000 acres zoned and get it in place. The problem is we let it happen. You got to make it happen. If you make it happen, you got to go get the land, you got to get the zoning, and the demand is there for it. All these other things that we're talking about, it all comes to play once you get it started. How much they're going to pay, how many they're going to employ, but you got to get the land first. You got to get the zoning, and you got to get everybody on board, and that can be a very tough thing to do because there's a lot of politics involved. So that's what I would do, and we already know nobody wants to be below 840. That's a given. So you're already limited. Everything below 840 it's eliminated. So it has to be 840, and chances are it's going to be around 840. Chances are it's not going to be towards Williamson County. Most likely it's going to be to Wilson County. And we've been studying. I've got some users that needs that kind of property. It's going to be tough. It's going to be very. It's not going to be an easy decision. Even though you see all this land out here, you get all these other. You know, going through the Grand Commission, what I'm talking about.
Any other questions for Mr. Simpson or the candidates before we move
What
forward?
was your minimum amount that you'd be willing to accept before you give somebody a tax abatement for the average jobs?
Well, you know, I'm not a big fan of that. Somebody asked me, Sam Stockard called me, he said, what do you think about Amazon? And I said, well, I'd vote for it, but I hold my nose. I think there's plenty of people out there who can pay without going into those type of users. We want people to really go be paying salaries. So, and the good thing about it, Murfreesboro don't have to worry about those kind of people anyway. Because there's too many people wanting to move here and can pay good quality payments, and jobs, and salaries. Okay, so I don't see that an issue for me because I don't think that's the one you're going to be aiming for. But you got, just like I've spent for the last 10 years, I average about $10,000 to $15,000 a year. I go to Las Vegas. It's in May. There'll be 37,000 realtors out there, commercial realtors. I go out there every year and I'm networking, and that's what you got to do. You got to go where they're at. You can't go call on them because you can't touch enough people. So you got to find out where's these people going to, where are they setting up, and everybody does the same thing because it's easy to go see 200 or 300 people in one location and just try to run 300 or 400 factories down. So to give that part of it, I'd have to get into it. And but it's there. It can be an easy process, but do yourself a favor. Well, first of all, you got to find out where y'all want it to be. Is that going to work? Then you're going to figure out your sewer problem. I don't know how it is going to be to switch from Murfreesboro to Smyrna to Murfreesboro. Surely it can be worked out. But it's a great, great opportunity. But don't sit around and let it happen. Go make it happen. That's what and that's what the kind of guy I am. I'm a make it happen guy. I know if you know me, everybody knows that. But you just can't just sit there and let it happen.
Any other questions, committee, before we move forward to final vote for any of the candidates? Ms. Shelton, if you'll call the roll again, we're voting for one for between Russell, Joyce, and Sims. So please call the roll, Ms. Scarlett. I called you Ms. Shelton again. I've only done that about 1,000 times. Sorry, I'm just going to stick to Becky. It's way easier.
Commissioner Harris?
Russell?
Commissioner Cush?
Can you come back to me? I'm going to go with Sims.
Commissioner McAdoo?
Russell?
Commissioner Reed?
I'm in the same boat with Cush. Sims.
Commissioner Stevens?
Say Joyce.
Commissioner Rather?
Joyce.
Commissioner Turner?
Russell.
Russell with three.
Russell with 3. Congratulations, Mr. Russell. Your name will be submitted before the full commission next week at our commission meeting. Again, thank you to everyone who submitted your application and for consideration. We very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I
Yes,
say
sir.
something?
You can.
I wish I could just take this entire room and I think I could conquer the world. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you all coming forward and offering yourself to do this. And I think the county should be very honored the fact that these individuals have done this, because I've seen nothing here but top of the line. And as you saw here, as we were trying to make these decisions, we were sitting here thinking, you know, how do you throw the best off of the pile? I mean, when it gets down to it, we were trying to sort, but you are. We just really appreciate you doing this and that you were here tonight and doing this, and we look forward to it, doing this, and we appreciate you being here this evening.
So I don't know who rolls off the IDB board next, but make sure you keep your applications handy.
Commissioner Stevens.
So our motion that we approved was one applicant does not receive a majority of the votes, the third place applicant will be dropped out of the round and the committee members would select one of the remaining 2. So nobody got a majority of the votes.
That's true.
So we're going to have to
Glad
decide.
you read that.
Technicality.
But you don't get too.
Have to
Yeah,
decide
no, but that's right. It's
between
important.
Joyce and Sims,
So-
which one
That's
gets it.
he's right. So Joyce and Sims tied. So now we need to vote between Joyce and Sims on moving to the final vote. So-
If you'll all remember when we did this for the sheriff, we did this about 18 times
We did, yeah.
before it finally threw.
But not all in one night.
You may have your opportunity.
That's true. Yeah, so let Ms. Shelton jot that down, or Ms. Scarlett, yeah, I'm sorry.
So-
I'm gonna be quiet. You just point and say, let her.
All right, so Mr. Chairman, remind us what we're about to do.
So Mr. Russell moves forward automatically to the final round, and now the next 2 between Ms. Joyce and Mr. Sims, we have to vote between those 2 to see who will be the final candidate of 2 in the final voting round. So we're voting right now between Mr. Sims and Ms. Joyce moving forward to be considered with Mr. Russell. And I jumped the gun there, Mr. Russell. I apologize about that. That's my fault.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, sir.
I am completely humbled by the people that are here tonight, and I fully understand there's no problem with it.
Sure. So Becky will call the roll now, and you'll vote between Joyce and between Sims. Becky?
Commissioner Harris?
Joyce.
Commissioner Cush?
Sims.
Commissioner McAdoo?
Sims?
Commissioner Reed?
Sims.
Commissioner Stevens?
Joyce.
Commissioner Rather?
Joyce.
Commissioner Turner?
Sims.
That's why they pay you the big money.
That's right. This is, I had a head full of hair before I got in here. So now we'll move forward with voting between Mr. Russell and Mr. Sims, and this will be the final vote that will move forward to the commission.
Commissioner Harris?
Russell.
Commissioner Cush?
Sims.
Commissioner McAdoo?
Russell?
Commissioner Reed?
Sims.
Commissioner Stevens?
Sims.
Commissioner Rather?
Joyce.
Can't do that.
I'm kidding. Mr. Russell.
Commissioner Turner?
Mr. Russell,
All right.
4-3.
4-3.
we are done with that.
Wow.
You found another room.
So that's it.
No, that's it. Yes, sir. Mayor Ketchum, were you going to?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Before everyone leaves, you know, these are only 7 votes that go for the full commission.
Right.
Any one of these people could walk in there and
He is nominated for.
That's
the-
right.
nominate for.
That's true.
Okay? I'm just saying that depends on how the politics works, but the recommendation will come from the steering committee as the #1 person from this committee, but then the floor will then be open for anyone to be elected from the floor.
And it is only a recommendation.
That is correct.
It's not a confirmation, it's a recommendation.
So then we'll show up to the full commission meeting, if the politics are right, you could get more than 7 votes.
So I encourage anyone that's still interested to make sure they make the commission meeting.
Right. Which is next Thursday.
Next Thursday night, the 17th, 6 o'clock. And this will be really early in the agenda too, so don't get there at 6:10. It comes up really early in the agenda. But thank you all. Moving on, committee, we do have, Ms. Stevenson is here. We'll let the crowd get out first.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I announced it early on, just to get that out of the way, so. So, Ms. Stevenson, you recall last month, Commissioner Rather brought up some concerns he had, among other things, but Sonia brought forward revision on the applications. I think she handed out paper copies. You should have them. If you don't, she can get you one, but I'll let her walk you through some of the revisions that she made on the application.
So before going to our online application system, the county had a paper application process, and the attorney's office went through that with us to make sure that we weren't asking questions that, you know, we shouldn't be asking and those type things. And based on what I was hearing from this committee, I made sure that I tried to incorporate those things into this application. I also sent it to Mayor Ketchum for him to review, for his approval and suggestions, and have updated it based on that. So the application is a little bit more detailed than what I have seen from the past applications for anybody applying for a board. We give you a little bit more information on the onset, so maybe you wouldn't have as many questions that you would have to ask. So it does, you know, the basic things about their address and their demographics and those type information. Ask about their education. Any professional references with contact information that you may need. That the professional references would be more related to the board in which they're applying for, not just necessarily professional reference. Their current or last employment, if somebody has retired, you know, you would know that they were retired or if they were actively employed. Other information would be why they feel like they're qualified to serve on that board. What experience do they bring to the table that is relevant to that board and committee? Any training related to the board, professional organizations, and lastly, why they're pursuing it. And the final thing would be that they sign a confirmation and disclaimer that everything that they've reported to you is true, so that, you know, if anything happens and you find to Commissioner McAdoo's point, sorry about that, Mayor Ketchum and Commissioner. Commissioner McAdoo's point from this evening, you know, based on the applications to be able to vet and those type things, that if you found out something at a later date, this does give us the opportunity, not that you couldn't do it now, but it is just a confirmation that they've not provided you true and factual information, that somehow they could be removed from that board without having to go through a large process. The other part that was brought to the table was, you know, are there any type of vetting process that we're doing for these individuals? And based upon that, we could, after the steering committee makes a recommendation, and I don't know if we need to do it when the steering committee makes a recommendation before we go to the commission meeting on that following Thursday, or after the commission meeting on that Thursday before they start on their board, to do a background check. Background checks are only done post-offer, so, or the county's policy is post-offer, so if this board is just referring, saying this is our recommendation, not necessarily confirming, then you might not want to do a background check on someone until after they've been confirmed by the commission, if that makes sense. And so then you could decide at that point whether you wanted them to start assisting on a board before it. Currently, our practice is that because it is a post-offer with employees, that if something is determined in the background check that, is against our policy, then we would release them after, and they understand that that's one of the confirmations, the statement in the confirmation, so that would be based on how you wanted it. The other page that I included with it is basically it's almost like an ethics statement. We included this in the new commission's handbook, with this new commission that came on this last time, and it's just stating, from an ethical conflict of interest statement is basically what it is. I had left one of the boards off of this, and Vicki caught that, and I added the additional board to this, and so they would just be signing. They're not trying to get onto this board for personal gain, nor will they be sharing information that, whatever they receive in that, as a result of being on the board, they wouldn't share that for personal gain for themselves or for family members or others. So it's really what the conflict of interest statement is. I don't know if this is what you were looking for. If you're not, let me know, and I will revise, amend, update, change.
The only thing that concerns me is when this commission or this subcommittee recommends somebody like Mr. Russell, and then he goes before the commission and there's no background check. Is there any way for us to do a background check after this committee recommends it?
I would like to ask Josh that question first, because and I'm not saying that you couldn't. I think we would have to make sure that they are aware of that process upon applying. I'm just saying that the current county process for employees is post-offer. And when you're, in my opinion, when you're recommending to the commission, it's not a post-offer until the full commission approves it. And so that would be my concern. But I don't have a problem asking Josh if we could do it between the two, because a lot of times the background check will come back within a day or two. So in many instances, if we did it, if we set it up for them to have a background check on Tuesday, and they had their background check on Tuesday, most cases I would have it back by Thursday. It would be very rare that I didn't, but I would not in all cases have it back that quickly.
Can you get back with us on that?
I sure can.
I think before we go before the commission, we should know. Instead of being
I think
an
the one,
embarrassing situation.
yeah, the only challenge there would be what we just ran into is what if someone from the floor wins
Yes.
a nomination? Then we can't do how do we, maybe that's a contingency we need to think about, is a floor nomination, and then they would win on the floor, and haven't had time to be vetted from steering to commission either. So Commissioner Rather, did you raise your hand?
Well, what Sonia was just talking about, there's a phrase in here that says that this person would authorize the county to conduct all inquiries as described to be conducted either pre or post appointment. So we could do it before,
I put
if
in
they
there
agreed
pre.
to it. But I think it was Chairman Turner that said this last time, or somebody did when I brought this up. That last page, those 3 paragraphs, would probably eliminate candidates
Sure.
that might have some issues in the past. Now, when we do it, that's kind of up in the air. We could do it before, we could do it after, but then the scenarios about getting appointed from the floor or what have you, I guess we have to.
Because if a candidate if somebody who, and correct me on this because I'm not real clear on this process, but if somebody wanted to apply and maybe they didn't meet the deadline before steering committee, could like, I didn't apply for the IDB, but could somebody nominate me from the floor even though I didn't apply? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, we have no standards at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so see, that would be problematic because somebody totally different might come in and apply and
Well, that's what I
get
was
elected.
referencing
Yeah.
was if we do that from committee to commission to committee, or committee to commission rather, and someone wins from the floor, we have we have no way to, unless to Commissioner Rather's point, they sign off and it says post confirmation, we still do all of this. If anything comes back, then it's null and void, and we go back through the process again.
How
Well, I
soon?
remember in 2010, I think it was 10, I got appointed to the BZA. And just a few days later, I kept getting a voicemail at home from the finance department. I'm like, what did I do? So I called and talked to the lady, and she said, you need to get up here and get this paperwork filled out, or you're not going to get paid. And I said, I get paid for this? And she said, yes. And I said, well, how much? She said, $100 a meeting. And I said, how many times do we meet? She said, well, it's once a month. I said, well, can't we do it every week or something? But my point to that story is, if somebody is nominated from the floor, they're still gonna have to come to your office, right? To get set up on payroll. And that's
Where that comes in.
This is part of the process of going through HR.
Well, and what the plan was with trying to make this more uniform, what I intended on doing is being at each of those commission meetings with a new hire packet and either saying complete as much of this as you can and then bring the information back to us, or I'm going to set up a link on our computer system and email them. Once we determine who it is, I can send them an email and say, go to this link to complete all your new hire paperwork, so they don't necessarily have to come to my office. And,
Right.
and so they could do that way. So I'm trying to look at what's gonna be easiest for everybody if they just, go onto their email, hit a link, and it takes them to all the paperwork, their W-4, their direct deposit, their, I-9, all that type stuff.
But I think one clarification, Mr. Chairman, I don't think anybody from the floor, so to speak, that hadn't turned in an application can be brought up. So like applications were taken today, I think to 5 o'clock. And as long as it was in by today at 5 o'clock, you could apply to this committee for review for IDB. But nobody from the floor hadn't been seen, hadn't been, come up here yet, because applications.
I don't think that's right.
I thought some random Joe Blow could be
Anybody.
nominated.
Yeah, could be
nominated.
I don't think so.
I thought
Is it in the rule?
Who would know, Mayor, who could we find confirmation on? Because I was under the impression, that would be easier if that was right. I
think it
just
was
thought anyone could
advertised.
come.
We took applications till today, and then that was it,
Yeah.
till 5 o'clock or.
It
I
actually
don't think-
says on the application that, the application actually said, and I took this from your current application, it says, should be, doesn't say must be,
Not shall.
should be turned in to the county mayor's office the Monday prior to the steering committee.
Okay.
But it doesn't say they have to.
And there's no time?
No, sir.
So how
Just
much
says-
is a background check?
Right.
How much does it cost the county?
$40.
40 bucks?
I think we definitely need some timelines and standards. The way we do this now is just reckless almost.
Yeah.
We talked about this several years ago when it didn't pass. We wanted to put a deadline to apply. If you want to be on a board, you have to turn your application in by 4 o'clock on, Thursday, Friday, Monday, whenever.
Why don't we
before the
just
meeting.
post it on NeoGov like we do everything else? Y'all decide, y'all make the announcement, and in the announcement, you say it's gonna be posted on the county's website to go apply. And on our website, when we post a position, we put, this position will come down at such and such time, and you have until that time to apply. They go on a minute later, guess what? The posting's gone.
But we also need a rule that says that you can't be brought up on the floor
That
unless
you
you
haven't
turn in
Do
an
that.
application
Do
originally.
that.
That'll prevent a lot of these problems, but in that, whatever rule or change we make needs to say that if you do get nominated on the floor, you still have to do the background check.
Well, and the other thing that you, to that point, is if you say you're gonna let them wait till, we'll just say Monday morning at 10 a.m., we'll pick some random time. There's no way I can get a background check on somebody who applies at Monday morning 10 a.m. and have it to you by this meeting by 5:30. It's just not possible.
Well, that's when you back it up in your education process, you educate the folks who want to apply. You say that all applications have to be in 48 hours or
Whatever time.
2 days prior to the steering committee, and no nominations would come from the floor. That would be the direction that the steering committee needs to set the rule.
Now, when we get a background check back, what disqualifies somebody? Like, so if somebody gets a misdemeanor charge for reckless driving 8 years ago, are they gonna be disqualified? Who decides who's disqualified and who's
Well,
not?
currently, it's based upon.
Felonies, isn't it?
It's, well, it can be some misdemeanors depending on what it is, and depending on what so it's different for each department. That's the thing that's kind of difficult about it. So let's just say somebody had a DUI 2 years ago, and they've already, went through probation and everything else. They may not qualify, I won't say they will not, may not qualify to work at juvenile detention center because they have to drive detainees to court. And so we have to say, is that somebody that we want driving a vehicle, or if they've still got a pending case. Or if somebody has a felony charge, if somebody had a felony charge, but it was 20 years ago and they've had good and lawful behavior and they've never had anything else, and depending on what the felony is, would be determined whether or not they could go into another job. So like, let's say they had a felony they were 18, 19 years old, and back then the felony may have been $500 where it is $1,000 now, that they stole something for $500, but they've been an adult 20, 30 years and they've never had anything else. And I mean, that's kind of what Ban the Box is about, is because you don't want to hold people who've had a felony years and years ago, they paid their dues and they've come back. It wouldn't mean that we wouldn't necessarily give them a job working, in one of our departments. It just means that we would have to be, if it was a sex offense, we would have to be more cautious because these people work with the public. So somebody with a sex charge could not work in like any of our corrections, any of our public safety, and really depending on the department where they could. So it's really based upon the charge in the department that they're going to be working in and who they're going to be serving. Yeah, I know, but what I'm saying, on the boards, they would be serving different,
Well, my question is, who makes the
a
decision?
beer board, so like a beer board, let me put it in that perspective. If somebody had a DUI like a month before, by accident, then you might not want them. So you need to, I guess, set up the parameters for who would qualify and who wouldn't.
Well, this either works like you have to get all the information before you vote the steering committee with all the background check information there, because if you do it after somebody's offered the position, you find out they've got a crime, well, who decides if they're going to qualify or not? Are they going to come back to the next commission and get terminated? I mean, who makes the decision that they're not going to qualify if it's offered to them already? I mean, I just think if we're going to go this route, we need to have all the information up front and be able to look at what's out there.
No gray area.
Right.
Which means you're going to have to run the background check on every applicant.
Right.
So.
And that could get, get expensive quick.
Now here's my next question. What if somebody is on the Board of Zoning Appeals and then 6 months later they apply to be on the Codes Enforcement Board? Are they gonna get another background check then, or is it
No,
gonna
sir.
be good for like
Yeah,
5 years or 2 years?
Well, typically, as long as if somebody, let's say they came off of that board, they were on that board for 2 or 3 years and they came off, and then they said, okay, I'm gonna apply for a new board. Currently, our policy is if you are a rehire, but you've had a background check in the last year, we don't rerun a background check because of the expense. But if you are a rehire and you've been gone from the county 3 or 4 years, then we do a background check because obviously things change. So typically, if you've had a background check within the last year, you won't get a new background check.
So on the IDB term, it's 6 years. So if somebody has a background check run, what's on the background looks good to us. When they reapply in 6 years for the next term, do they get another check then? Or
Yes.
since they're already on the board, they don't have to do it?
Well, I guess that would be a decision of the board. If you reappoint, then it's no break in service. That's kind of how it would be for a position if somebody was transferring departments or whatever. But I think that this board could decide every time you reapply for a new board.
It's still an application. I mean, to me, if
Yeah.
they submit an application, they get a background check, whether it's a reappointment or a brand-new applicant. I
I
don't
just
know
think
why
you
we
would just
do
have to
that.
outline that.
Mr. Harris.
One of the things that I was concerned with is, like, when we're giving recommendations for this board, we don't have any qualifications for some of these applicants. You know, like, for instance, when we had a zoning, we eliminated somebody because they wouldn't qualify. But we didn't know that until after we already agreed to put them before. Is there any way that we can start getting qualifications for these boards so we can eliminate people that way and get the best qualified people we can?
We
Well,
could
you-
create a job description.
You have a question that specifically asks qualifications for serving on the board.
But I understand that, Commissioner, but what if they're not, we got one applicant, and they're not, they put some on there that they went to MTSU, not necessarily qualified, what do we do? Do we have to take that one person because that's the only person that came forth, or are we able to say, keep it open another month?
So we could, the HR department could reach out to each of the departments that these boards serve out of and find out what qualifications it takes to be on that. I mean, I'm willing to do that and kind of, not really a job description, but it is a job description to say, these are the minimum qualifications for this job. And then it would be based on whatever that board is responsible for doing. And then that could be on the website with the application, that they read that and sign that and say, they're signing off that says, yes, I have the minimum qualifications for this position. That, because in our online application system, there's some questions that we can ask and they can answer yes or no, I have that, or how many years of experience. So we could put that on that application process for them, and then it would give you all the answers that you need at one time.
But are not these boards set up as citizens boards?
Mhm.
And, I mean, you start setting qualifications or whatever, basically they're citizens boards.
Yeah, but
I mean, you can specify that you might have knowledge of what this is, like if you're going into zoning, you need knowledge of building and this sort of thing to serve on this board.
I think
But
that
you
might
have
be
to-
what
you have to-
Commissioner Harris is getting at.
you
Like
have
if
to
you're,
be limited in how you.
well, I think they did it tonight. I mean, if you're
Okay.
submitting, everyone for the application, submitted application for the IDB, made sure you knew that they had business background. To me, that's a qualification.
That's the
that
qualification you got.
we're looking
And that's
for.
what I'm saying, I mean, we can't get too.
Yeah, right, you can't have a
Right.
master's in 15 years and all
Yeah,
that, where you
yeah.
make that pool so small with citizens.
That's what I'm
You just can't-
saying. I mean,
yeah. And you don't want to
you
disqualify
specify-
people from applying either. That's the
Yeah.
flip side is,
Yeah.
yeah, they might not be qualified, but I wouldn't want to sit up here and tell, if you think you can serve the community, then God bless you for it. And it might not work in that role, but maybe it encourages you to look at something else. And, hopefully that happened tonight. But I don't think we're going to solve it tonight, I guess is what I was getting at. I didn't want to cut Commissioner Stevens off, and I know he was thinking through some of that. But I think at a minimum, we need to consider moving forward, how do we keep the background checks and have these tweaks on the application where they start filling those out as quick as we can get them in, and then figure out what does that look like on post-confirmation from the committee, post-confirmation from the commission. Is it an asterisk next to you're approved from the commission if you pass this because we didn't get a chance to do it? I don't know what the right answer is, but maybe that's a conversation that continues on this committee.
We might need our attorney here to help us with some.
Yeah, I was just say, Josh, we don't want to put Robert on the spot being a commissioner. We need our county attorney here to be able to walk us through that too. And so maybe not to defer anything to February, but I think we need to continue the conversation into February before we do anything tonight.
I think the application is 10 times better than what we
Yeah,
had.
yeah, it's
Very
good
much
job.
more detailed,
I
and
agree.
I think
Much more
it's
detailed.
much more thorough.
I agree.
So a few months ago, we had several people that applied like kind of back-to-back for multiple boards, and instead of
Right.
running a background check on them, maybe like once a year, if you pass
Right.
one of the year, you don't have to do it again.
Right.
I think there were 2 or 3 people that were just kind of back-to-back, their terms on boards expired
Right.
really close together, so that we wouldn't have to necessarily rerun them if they just had one a month before, but I mean, I think you're gonna have to do it like the minimum like a year or 2 years to be fair to everybody.
In our public safety department, and I mean, this is different, the boards are different from the employees. I'm just kind of giving you some information, not that that's what you have to do, just so that you have it. But on our public safety departments, we currently have to run a background check every 5 years. That's what the government, the state, and I don't know if it's the federal, it's part of the PREA, Prison Rape Elimination Act, and so they make everybody have a new background check every 5 years. And so that's one of the things we do. So for that, which is different from this, but that just gives you a perspective that you could do it only once a year so as not to have somebody redo it. And then we could even visit if somebody's reapplying for a board that they've already been on, it's no different than a transfer or whatever. If they're reappointed, they're still.
I've got one question for Mayor Kettering, or Deputy Mayor might know too. How many, are there any committees that is specifically appointed by the mayor as well, but is impacted by commission? So I served on the Ethics Committee under Mayor Burgess. Would that fall under, and there was citizens that could be appointed to that committee too, but it's not listed here. Would that still fall under the jurisdiction of the commission, or was that, because they were made up of members of the commission, but the mayor asked those that want to serve on that. So is that,
Public Building Authority
okay,
is appointed.
so that's two. I just didn't know, were we only worried about the folk at the scope being the county commission right now, not all county?
Planning Commission.
Okay.
They're on here.
And it's rare that we'll have.
appointed by the mayor.
Right, the mayor, that's what I was getting at was, are we doing any that the mayor might touch and the commission, or are we leaving off ethics and we're leaving off the building authority? I want to make sure we cover everything while we're doing it on the application. So I don't even think with the ethics, I don't think you have to submit an application, it's the mayor.
The Planning and Public Building Authority's on here, just not the ethics. I don't know why.
Yeah, I didn't know, I didn't think about it, but I would think the ethics would be one we'd for sure want to make sure people are ethical.
We'll look at that tomorrow, and I'll get you a
Okay.
list of all those that
Okay.
the mayor appoints.
Does that make sense, Commissioner Cushman? I was trying to tell you, just want to cover everybody.
But it's rare that you'll have 11 people. Many times we don't
Yeah,
have anybody.
we have the minimum lots of
Because
times,
there's-
yeah.
It's citizen board, and many times nobody submits a name, and we're scrounging around going, hey, you want to serve on the
Right.
You know? It's rare that we had this number of good quality candidates tonight. I mean, this is strong, like you said.
The number of boards.
It's a strong group, but it's rare we have 11.
Very rare.
Something else in our
Commissioner
discussion
Stevens, yeah.
next month is I still would like to see us put a limit on how many boards
On the
someone
boards,
can
yeah.
serve on. 'Cause
I agree.
When I was first on the commission, there was
No, I
somebody that was
agree.
on 4 or 5
I-
things, and it's like, come on, let's spread it around a little bit, you know?
Yeah, 300,000 people, there should be
Yeah,
enough people.
I mean,
There's plenty.
two's plenty. Just pick which two you want to serve on and let some other people get involved too.
Sure.
But that was one reason I was saying, you know, we start setting qualifications too stringent for getting people served, because, you know, a lot of times when I get people that come to me and they start talking about, well, this needs changing, this sort of thing, and I said, have you ever served on any of our committees? And they said, well, no. I said, well, how about checking that out? And there's openings come all the time, why don't you serve? And I have a little, I guess in the back of my mind, thinking that get you on some of these committees and get you in a position where you understand how it all works and whatever. And that's the way I think we find a lot of our good people out here that will be a part of this government. And that's the thing. I don't want to run citizens off. I want them to be a part of all of it.
Yeah. Commissioner Cushman?
One last question. If, on this post-offer or pre-offer background check, if we did it post to try and save money and not have to do so many background checks, if, for instance, if Mr. Warren failed or did not meet the qualifications, would we have to, legally, do we have to repost the position and go through it again? Or can we automatically default to the number 2 person?
That all needs to be in the rules that the
Yeah, that,
committee
I was gonna
needs
say.
to establish. I think this is ongoing work with this committee.
Yeah, Josh might need to answer even some of that legally. I don't know,
Good
Commissioner
question,
Cush.
but
Yeah, it's a good question,
It's
because
been good work from the committee.
I don't
know.
I don't see why it would be a problem for the applicant to pay the $40
I
background check.
wondered about that.
Because we could get into hundreds of people a year, and
Yeah.
that'd be thousands of dollars on the county taxpayers just for their background check, if we can do it. I mean,
Well, the only reason, the only thing I could think of, I'm not saying that they couldn't pay for it, because I do know that at some employers, they require the employee to provide a background check and a drug screen and a physical. They'll have them bring it to them with it. But the thing is we want to make sure that our applicants utilize our background checking system through the TBI and the FBI, because you can go online to background check screen and all that, and so I don't think that would be a problem
That's what I'm
as far as
saying.
they pay for it, but
fill
Could
out
you
their
put that on the
application. When they
Yeah.
pay their application, or put in their application, they pay
They
the
turn in the
$40,
fee.
whatever it is. We do the background check, but they're just paying for it. And it might be a line across the, in the sand there that, well, I'm not paying that. Well, you don't want to be on the board,
Yeah.
for the committee. So,
I think it's all continuing discussion committee, to be frank. This will probably carry into February. One question I would want to ask the committee, though, what is the low-hanging fruit we can get moving on tonight?
We can do application for sure.
Is there a motion around that for what Commissioner Stevens just said? He had mentioned the application. Commissioner Rather, were you going to say something?
Well, some of these meetings I go home and it's just like a piece of twine just came unraveled and things hang out there. I'm glad we're still talking about this application. I think if somebody gets appointed from the floor, they're still going to have to do this document. And then it goes to Simon. Or should we bring it here, since we were the ones that are nominating people out there, does that come, you do the background check and they come do the paperwork and then bring it back to this committee?
The only time I really need to bring back the background check, you know, to make you aware of it.
It's dirty.
If there's an issue. The rest of the time, it would just go on business as usual.
Well, and I don't know if I'm misunderstanding Commissioner Rather, but then I don't know how we would vote for them on the commission, only to send it back to the committee and say, well, we're going to overrule the commission by sending it back to the committee.
Well, and again,
So I don't know if we
that
can do
goes to who
that.
decides what disqualifies you or not.
Yeah.
If you have a reckless driving from 8 years ago, it's a misdemeanor, and that has nothing to do with codes enforcement.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. But who
So
makes that decision?
Who makes that decision? So I just think for this to work, you got to have all the information on the front end.
Yeah.
To look at everybody and make it all apples to apples.
I mean, the application says that you may be required to do this, and if so, your continued appointment would be subject to, but if you didn't do it, then it's in there that if you wanted to do it, but you don't have to do it. Does that make sense?
Well, I would like
Is
to
there a
make
motion? Yeah,
that
Commissioner
we,
Stevens.
approve the new application for appointment with one minor change, and that's for them to specifically list which county boards they're already serving on as well. Because it says, it's got a place on there, you currently serve on a board, but that's kind of like, do I serve on the board of a nonprofit, or does that mean the county board? It's on the
It
first
did.
page.
Yeah, it did, but I'll change that to say.
Yeah, you just said like county board. Do you currently serve on a board? It's about halfway down.
But it says, please note the name of the board, date served, and organization. Do you need me to expound on that
I
more?
would say county board. but
County board, not state, okay.
Like, are they on one of ours? And the way it's worded, it kind of sounds like, am I on the board of Special Kids? Am I on the board of this?
I see what you're saying.
Like a nonprofit, or am I on the board of directors in a
Would you
company?
want to know if they were on
Well, sure,
boards
that's
with
good
us?
information to know too.
Yeah.
I can add that in this additional information.
Break it into two questions.
Or I could add in the additional information, other non-county boards, which other non?
So I'd make the motion with that minor change.
There's a motion from Commissioner Stevens. Is there a second? Second. Second from Commissioner Cush. Any discussion? All in favor of the? Whoops,
Do you
sure.
want it to, do you want, as part of your motion, to have, do you currently serve on a county board, and also to have a question, do you currently serve on a board?
Any other?
So your motion is.
Professional.
Other
both of
non-county
those.
board.
Okay.
Yeah, or professional board or something.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion
Does it
carries.
encompass elected officials, or do you need to have two questions? Have you ever worked for Rutherford County Government?
This is-
Or have you ever?
Are y'all considering this part of the
No,
application
I'm
process?
deferring it. Yeah.
I don't think elected office.
I can ask that.
That doesn't really fall under Rutherford County Government.
No, we're not in.
Okay.
Is there any other items that we want to cover on this under new business? Sonia had a question about guideline. I think Robert was, or Commissioner Stevens was probably including that. Were you?
Including this ethics and conflict of interest statement?
I thought that was all part of.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
that's
what
what
I
I'm
think that
saying,
was
you're
covered.
complete.
Yeah,
Okay.
so everything in there was covered.
I just want to make sure I get my action items before I leave so that I bring back what you're asking me
Sure.
for. So one, you wanted me to check with Josh about the legality of pre-or post. And also, I'm guessing that, you know, him to be here next time.
Yeah,
to
Mayor, can we
actually
make
look
sure,
this.
Mayor Ketchum, that Josh, or Steve, that Josh is here next month?
Sure can.
And back up the process for the background checks potentially, you know, what that would look like if we did it sooner than later. To try to determine what offenses by postings would be, something that we would not consider for somebody on the board, whether it be a misdemeanor charge or the other. Qualifications, I would get with each of the departments that do this and see if anything's in the state code that says they have to have a certain qualification, and I believe each of the departments would know that they report to, you know, what the qualifications are. Try to get that list together for you to review. And how often to run the background check, if they're still appointed or they're appointing for several different positions, and if the applicant had a bad background check, could we go to the second applicant? Is that correct? Is that everything? Okay. Thank you.
Under new business, just one point of discussion real quick, as we talked about, we are going to be meeting with our legislative delegation next Tuesday night here in the courtroom, or in the courthouse rather, at 5:30. Mayor Ketron just spoke with Vicki. Vicki's going to be sending an email out hopefully tomorrow, alerting the commissioners to that. The state delegation could not meet tonight. They had events going on for session starting tomorrow, and their events that they have, so they will be meeting with. It will be a regular steering committee meeting. There is no business that we're going to cover outside of conversation with the state delegation. One thing I would like to ask the committee to do, if you could send any questions to me, I'm trying to filter some and funnel some questions to them so they can get us some answers to some pretty tough questions centered around funding and whatever might be on the minds of the commissioners, where we go into some of those conversations. It's not, well, we'll have to look into that for you, and then we don't hear from anybody. I'd really want to try to change that and work with them, and this is our opportunity to ask questions to them. We don't get to see them as much as we probably need to. Spoke with the mayor a little bit about hopefully what we're going to do in this meeting. I want it to be productive. I don't want it to last longer than it needs to, and I also don't want to sit there and drag it out for the sake of saying, well, I want to make sure everybody earns their time there. It's going to be up to us to own that, and it's going to be up to the delegation to work with us to be held accountable, to be quite frank. We're working together for Rutherford County. They need to hear from us, and they need to hear from what we're hearing from our constituents, and it's in line with what they're hearing. So mark your calendar for that if you can. And is there any other business that needs to come before the committee tonight?
I just want to make a
Yes, sir.
comment, and
Sure.
I'll shut up.
Tuesday.
On this application, they tell us why they think they're qualified.
Mm-hmm.
When I first got on the BZA, I promise you I was not qualified to be on the BZA that first night I was there. I kind of didn't even know what they did, and I had to ask others and read up on it, and you know, over time. But if you look at I didn't know if my business background qualified me to make decisions on the BZA.
Sure.
But somebody, and I don't know if it's you or somebody else, made a really good comment tonight that hit me in the head. If you're here and you're volunteering to serve, you're qualified. I think I heard that.
Yeah, I was saying
somewhere
that,
down
you know,
there.
if God bless you for having that passion, because
Yes.
that matters. And
And-
that's where that was coming from.
You know, Jared Barrett, I brought his name up both times, and I get to talk about him because he moved. But Jared is what I call a digger. He's an archaeologist, and he goes around and does all these digs. Well, how does that qualify him for the BZA? But I tell you what, he did a real good job.
Yeah, sure. And that might be a little bit about what Commissioner Reed was getting at. We don't want to overqualify for no reason when there's hidden gems out there that we don't know about them unless they apply and we get a chance to talk to them, and they wow us, and then they make a big difference in the community, and that's what matters. I think that's the key, is finding those people that we all define qualifications differently, and outward appearance doesn't always indicate inward work ethic and belief and ability to contribute. So it's all points well taken.
I just think if they're willing to serve
Sure.
and get in the arena, instead of sitting over here saying, well, that's
Right.
what y'all ought to be doing, you bunch of bonds. Get in the arena, join in.
Yeah, everybody wants to throw the ball, but nobody wants to sit in the tank.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is.
I agree, my point to that was, I agree with that comment. If they're willing to serve and they show up here with an application, they've pretty much got the qualifications.
Sure.
For the most part, in my opinion.
Sure. Any other business to come before the committee? We stand adjourned. Thank you, Commissioners.
Alabama, Clemson just got that.